G'day all, welcome back to the G-Man Show. Today we're going to talk through a video called My Unplanned Home Depot Retirement Job from 401k to aisle 4k. I want to talk about this video because there's a lot of conjecture out there about the elder generations being wealthy, or being well-to-do, and living the high life. And I don't think that's further from the truth for a vast majority of the population. So let's jump in. I'll give you my comments throughout. If you want to watch this video without my interjections, please go and check the video description for the link to that original video.
Well, I'm here. We're here. Home Depot. Today, I'm talking about something I avoided sharing, but knew it was an important part of my retirement story, and that is working into my 60s or into my retirement. And the fact that I work at Home Depot, or I work at Home Depot at 60 plus years of age, 66 to be exact. I started here, this Home Depot, 3.5 years ago. It's been a positive experience. I'm going to talk about that today and maybe give you some a story that might help you if you're looking for something to go, a company to work for. These types of companies are, I think, viable options.
I want to say one thing before we get started on the video as well. I think it's really good people still working into retirement. I think people look at this thing, retirement, as some sort of bliss. And I think a lot of people really underappreciate the social interaction that you get from work and having a purpose in society. I know people who are retired in my family and in my extended network, and people who I worked with when I started out in my career, and I've been told by all of them that they get bored, very, very bored. And a lot of them are actually pursuing work just to keep them busy. So it's not always about not having the right amount of money, or maybe not have made sound financial decisions throughout your life. People generally do it as well to keep active in the community. Now, he's talking about Home Depot, which is an American business, a chain. But we have Bunnings Warehouse over here, or Mitre 10, which are those large same hardware stores. And you see a lot of people that would probably be in that retirement age, working and looking really happy being there. Like, think about it. You go and ask somebody where the paintbrushes are, somebody who looks like they're probably in their 60s or more, and they've remembered where every single thing in that shop is. Like, it gives them a sense of pride when you ask them where that item is. They can just tell you off the top of their head, and you say, "Hey, wow, that's awesome. Cheers, mate." Like, so there's a lot more to it than just money. But also, in saying that, yes, there are a lot of people who are still working due to the fact that life happens. For me, life is like a share market. If you look at the trajectory of your life, now this doesn't happen for everybody. Some people, their life keeps going up and up and up. Other people, it goes in cycles. So you can never know what's coming for you in life. And there are a lot of people out there who may have been doing really well, but then they had health issues, or they had family issues, or divorces, or whatever it may have been, that wrecked their finances and where they thought they were going to end up in their life, and they don't have a choice to work. So I'm probably calling out both cohorts of people here.
Let me be clear. This wasn't the plan. It was never the plan that I would work 20 some years, 30 years in my profession, whether it be teaching, and then I was going to go to work for Home Depot, collect Social Security and go to work for Home Depot. Not the plan. I think, to be honest, the avoidance of wanting to talk about working in retirement is a level of embarrassment, shame even, that here I am working at Home Depot. I guess I'll throw this in here now. Remember the threats of, if you don't pay attention in school, by your teachers or whoever, if you don't study, you're going to be working at Home Depot. I think back then, what I remember people saying is, you're going to end up a Walmart greeter. And I might make a video about that, because that demeans the person you're talking to. But you know what else? It also demeans the person that's doing that job.
Absolutely. I don't think there's a job too big or small. Okay. I think everybody adds value to society and to the economy if they're out there doing some sort of gainful employment or volunteering. You made a really good point, and a really good point that I wanted to raise was it's the point I touched on at the start about especially young people. I hear young people grumbling a lot about boomers and they capitalised on everything and now they've pulled the ladder up. Now that might be true for some. Like absolutely, there's a lot of angst out there, especially towards landlords. Landlords who might have bought houses 30, 40, 50 years ago even, and are extracting as much value out of those properties through rent. There's a lot of anger about that, and they're seen as parasitic. I can understand, look, both sides of why people would think that and why people think people are also whinging. You know, they did make an investment as well. They put their hard-earned money and they've put it to work. But also, they're going to be people who are struggling in life, and with ever-increasing rents, the biggest expense most people are going to have is putting that roof over their head. So obviously, these people who are doing really well off the back of these people's struggles are going to be hated. So I can understand. I can really understand it. But there's no job too big or small. And I also want to talk about people of this gentleman's age having to go back to work because it's unaffordable to, if you say you hadn't made the right decisions or you've had personal circumstances happen that have really scuttled your money, your retirement fund, whatever savings you might have had, unless you own your house outright, and even then the age pension doesn't really give a standard of life that people would want. It gives an existence, you know, enough to get some bread and milk, pay a few bills, but you're not going anywhere or really doing anything. You're just more or less waiting to die. So some people are just taking it upon themselves, whether through need or because they want a bit more, to go back to work. But a lot of people are back having to work due to the fact that superannuation and pensions, especially in Australia, haven't been around that long. So you don't have people who have huge amounts of super to fall back onto because they didn't have a whole working life, having that percentage of their income working for them in a fund. You also have people who may be disabled or intellectual disabilities as well. And they can do greeter jobs. They can do Bunnings jobs. So I think people just have to do it sometimes. But that's one thing I want to talk about. It's something in society that I don't like, and you see a lot of people acting this way from a place of supremacy because of where they sit in their life. But it only takes one huge life event to really bring you down to earth. And I can speak from a male perspective. I think for a lot of men, I can talk about it because I've been through that. I've been through a divorce before. It very much eradicates your money. I went through it young, so able to recover and go onwards and upwards. But there are guys 50s, 60s, 70s, even hear about it in their 80s, getting divorced, and they lose a huge chunk of their net worth. They have to pay ongoing child support, maybe not at that age, but at Gen X age in the 50s. Spousal support, especially at elder age, you've been with that person maybe for a long period of time. That stuff gets garnished from their wages. It isn't voluntary, and so you're forced to work. That's one big thing that people don't understand. Life has a way of bringing you down to earth sometimes. Now, some people never experience these things. Some people can never see that people aren't there a lot of the time for circumstances out of their control and the system that we do live in. I can talk about people that I know that are retired. There's one specific person I know. She's in her early 70s and she's struggling very, very hard because the cost of living, the cost of medication, healthcare, especially at that age, has gone through the roof. And yes, they might not have made the best decisions financially in their life, but she now has to continue to work even in poorer health. So I like to let people to leave judgments at the door as well.
And I have a story about a Walmart greeter, and it's a good one. But that's just wrong. I don't think we should be talking about jobs or about people in that way related to the job. So maybe that's just me, but maybe I'm kind of, maybe I feel this sense of embarrassment because of just my personal experiences. But here I am. Maybe it's a reflection of what I've thought when I look at people. I've had thoughts of, look at that poor guy. Sometimes I think about that when I'm at Costco or Sam's Club, and I look right now, you look at all the people giving the food samples, and you just think, wow, that's a tough way. They're doing that not because of the love of the job. I know they're doing that because all they've probably got is Social Security, and this is helping them buy food, pay the necessities only bills. And so there is a feeling that of empathy, maybe some sympathy. I think of people thinking, look at that poor guy, ended up in retail in the golden years. Again, not what you plan to do. But
Okay, talk about it too. You can put the shoe on the other foot. I want to raise that point that I talked about earlier again. This one guy I know, he had a really successful career. He has made good decisions, so he doesn't have to work, but he's bored. He's bored. He says, I'm just waiting to die here. So for something to do and for a little bit of pocket money, he goes and drives around doing sort of like a sales rep type job, delivering parts. I don't know exactly what he does to factories or auto repair shops. Because he likes going out, talking to people. They know him. He feels useful. He works a few days a week. Because he told me, he said, retirement. He said it feels really good at first. You've gotten there for the first maybe 3 or so months. It feels like this really big holiday. It's exciting. But then you sort of lose your purpose. And he said to me, I can see why people die very quickly after retiring. Because nature has a way of closing off loose ends, as ruthless as that sounds. Now, yes, some people do hang around for decades and they're 95 years old and been retired for 30 or 40 years. But I thought that was a really insightful comment from someone who's living in that position.
Let me just say there is a positive side to this. This is also an important feeling that you must have ended up here, Phil, or I look at our people, they must have ended up where they are ultimately because they failed, to carry out a financial plan. They failed to be disciplined. They were irresponsible. Now, this video isn't going to be about that because I was not. I had a plan. I had financial knowledge, but that's a whole different story. Today, though, it's about where I have landed. It's about making the best of the way things have turned out.
I think that's a really great point. And that's why I talk about planning. It's really good to have a plan and direction with where you want to go in your life. But if I was to look back 5 years even, my life has turned out far differently than what I thought it would have and what I was planning to. Both in a sense of where I've ended up, financially, friendship groups, relationship status, all that sort of thing. So it's really good to have a plan. But as good old Mike Tyson said, everyone's got a plan until you get punched in the face. Life can be very cruel.
So this path of ended up working at Home Depot with my Social Security was not really a result of a bad decision, nor a number of bad decisions. It's a result of the way life has turned out. I had a teaching career. I had a corporate career. And my last corporate job, I was in a sales position selling an online education program and helping the people then successfully complete it. They found that there was a high degree of failure, which then resulted in a very high percentage of non-payment. So I said, I can get these people through it. And I was getting the people that I was helping through the course successfully. So they put me in charge of a new department that did just that, get them back involved. Well, that came to an end. I quit that job because there was a change in corporate direction. And then I was off work for a couple months. Well, not having savings that sustain me the rest of my life, I started thinking about what am I going to do? What kind of businesses could I start, et cetera, et cetera. When you're at this age, though, starting a business with little capital, and less energy than when you're younger, that's not necessarily a viable one.
Same as investing. So investing really pays off over longer periods of time. Yes, you can hit the jackpot and have a big win on some sort of penny stock that you've gambled on, or you look at Wall Street bets. But then there's probably for one person that said that they've had a huge win and turned $20,000 into 200,000 or 2 million or whatever it may have been. There are a whole bunch of other people that are in negative equity because they used leverage to gamble. But in terms of investing, and that's probably one thing that does hold static, saving probably isn't the answer, because having money in savings in a bank account, yeah, sure, you might earn interest on it, but inflation is always going to be higher than interest. The cash rate's always going to be higher than what you're going to get from interest, less the tax. So really, at very best scenario, you make a tiny fractional amount of money, or as well, you've maintained just that base balance, accounting for inflation. And so that's the advice. I'm not a financial advisor, but the advice I've seen that people have been successful is that they've started small with investments, either through a fund or even adding to superannuation, if they're not diligent enough and I would say responsible enough to manage money, putting it into the superannuation through extra, what do they call them, extra additions every month. They're the ones that have done really well. It doesn't have to be a property. I think property has probably got a high. It wasn't what it was, and I think for me, property. This is not my honest opinion, but getting into property now, you need a huge amount of a deposit, talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, plus all the transaction costs, and then all the ongoing and maintenance costs of that. Well, my honest belief is you're probably better off if you have that quantum of money, or not even that, researching into an index fund. Put it there, let people who know what they're doing manage it, and have that passively growing for you over time. Yes, it'll have its ups, it'll have its downs, but over that large time horizon, if you were to do any calculator on the internet about how much your additions to, say, your savings account, you do that every year for 20 years plus the interest, and then check the profile against that, against some sort of investment fund, you'll be leaps and bounds ahead through the investments. So that's one thing I'll say. People try to invest as early as you can, because I think at this age, the real benefits of that are minor. Unless you have a huge win. You're in your 60s and 70s, you're probably not going to be around to enjoy the fruits of that investment. So he makes a really good point there. Same as starting a business. Business is high risk. So unless you are an expert in your field and you've got a client base lined up and you think it's low risk, I think at this age, just starting something and chasing some sort of startup, huge risk of wiping you out, because a lot of businesses fold. I've had a number of people say to me, oh, I think I'm just going to quit my job and go and start a cafe and be an entrepreneur. I mean, if you want to work 150 hours a week for probably less than what you're making now, be my guest.
I had a neighbor that was working part-time at Home Depot, this Home Depot. And I thought, yeah, are they hiring? I asked her, are they hiring? She goes, yeah. She said, they'd hire you in a heartbeat. And I put an application in and I got hired in a heartbeat. I ended up at the service desk, and thankfully so. The people that work here, there's really no middle ground. There's a bunch of young people, 18 to 25, and then there's a bunch of old people, 60 plus. Not a whole lot in between, except the career-minded individuals that are working up through the company. And I remember in the interview, I got interviewed 2 different times by 2 people, great people. I felt like they were giving me a chance. And the second interview basically was the hiring interview, that like, let's find a place for you. Well, I put the application in for building and lumber. I thought, now, ignorance is bliss. I thought this would be a good way to get back into shape. Yeah, it is, but not at 60. I was 62 or 3 at the time, because throwing around 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 pound bags of concrete, which does happen on occasion. Look, I'm not saying I couldn't get back into shape, might take a few years. Uh, who knows what I might hurt, but thank goodness the person that interviewed me said, "Well, Phil, you can choose what you want to do. I recommend the customer service desk." And that just seemed like a no brainer. I'd pretty much been in customer service my whole life, and dealing with the public, and that came second nature to me. So there it was. I said, I'll defer to your recommendation. And she took one look at me, I'm sure, maybe two, and thought, this guy, I appreciate his heart to want to work in lumber and building materials, but he's better off standing at the service desk.
That's another thing I wanted to talk about as well. I think it's really good that these large organisations do hire people of advanced age, but I know people in my network who are around this age and they can't get a job because no one wants to hire them because they're seen as not ideal employees. So there's a lot of ageism out there. And so while this gentleman was able to get a job, and there are others, Bunnings and all that, there probably are many other people who might have health issues, disabilities, might not have education, whatever it is that people want these days for entry-level jobs, and therefore they're unemployable and really suffering and struggling. I know several people like this. They'd love to have a job. No one will hire them, not even in a sandwich shop, a bakery to make coffees and put sandwiches together for minimum wage.
Hey, I want to interject here. I'm back here editing and working through this story, working at Home Depot. And two things. Number one, if you're at this far and you're still listening, would you mind subscribing, liking? It is important, and I would really appreciate it. Number two, the other thing I want to say is a positive coming up about working at Home Depot is the amount of the younger people that will help you out. When I do have to load an 80-pound bag of concrete or move it, they always step in and say, "Phil, let me get that for you." And then I joke around with them saying, when I was your age, I used to do two of these, one in each arm. I started part-time, as everyone does. Within a month, they offered me full-time if I'd be a closer. I said, no way. And to be honest, there was an adjustment period of actually standing on my feet all day. Something when you're younger, you don't give a second look or a second thought of. But on top of that, it's a concrete floor. And
I think it makes a really good point too about being able-bodied, because a lot of people don't look after their health. They knock themselves around a bit, whether it's just not exercising, maybe eating junk food, not having a good diet, maybe smoking, drinking, using other substances. And then you get to this age, you literally are not capable of doing the job needed from you, especially if it's somewhat manual labor, which a lot of these entry-level jobs may be. So you make a really great point there. So that's probably one thing people should be more aware of as well. Your health is priceless. So doing what you can, yeah, sure, you can't foresee what's going to happen in the future. You might have an accident, you might have some hereditary condition, you might be prone to cancers or whatever else. But looking after your health, that is probably the best investment you can make long term. I'm not saying be a professional athlete or anything like that, but it's just being mindful that we're not young and invincible forever. And that's the boomer side of me. You guys call me a boomer in a lot of the comments. There's a boomer side of me coming out and seeing that from people who I know really well, who are around this age range. I used to work years ago in the trades. I won't say which one because I don't want to dox anybody. But there was this one guy I used to work with, and he was in his 50s, and he just knocked himself around with alcohol and everything else. And he looked like he was about 80. And he got to a certain point in his 50s, he wasn't even able to work anymore, and he really struggled. He was on Centrelink and all that, had really bad mental health issues, and was really struggling to survive. And that was 20 years ago. So I can imagine what it's like now for people trying to survive on government benefits. Very, very hard. But I'll probably say one more parting comment before I end the video. Because if you want to watch this guy talk, just jump over there. I just don't want to play him talking without me talking about it much. The best things to avoid getting yourself in a situation is thinking ahead, but also the person or the people that you get married to in your life, male or female. That's the biggest deciding factor, from spending habits through to the likelihood of potentially getting divorced. And if someone's got a bit of a mean streak and goes for you, that's going to ruin your life, especially at 50 and 60. I know guys who have been divorced in their 50s and 60s, and that nice big home that they had, all the luxury and stable support that they thought they had financially, gone in a matter of a few months going through the family court, or however long it takes for people. Some people get it done quick, some people get it long and protracted. So that all goes up in smoke. And I know two guys in this situation who are now living in, I know it's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype for a reason, living in one-bedroom apartments, paying rent when they already had homes owned, paid off. But the money that they got through the financial settlement, the equity that they got, wasn't enough to buy another house, wasn't enough to satisfy the banks in terms of their age. It's very hard to be lent money to take debt on, same as like for business purposes as well. When you get old, these financial institutions, they don't want anything to do with you. Even any age over 40, if you want to go for a 30-year home loan, which more and more people are doing, soon they'll probably be 40 years, they'll push it out. You have to give them a statement and a plan as to what you do if you can't earn the same amount of money anymore in the future. So there's a lot of difficulties out there getting old. So the main purpose of this is, number one, don't look down on people who work in these jobs and are there. A lot of them are there for circumstances out of their control. And also, there are people out there who didn't make the right decisions and set themselves up young. So it's a bit of a learning as well as to, do you want to be like this? You know, a lot of people live the high life when they're young. They think, I'll worry about it when I get older. When I'm over 40, I'll settle down and I'll work it out then. And you've really lost probably the most two beneficial decades of your life to set yourself up financially, being your 20s and 30s, to get that compound outcome. They're the most pivotal times of your life. Now, if you're older than that and watching this, it's not game over. You can always start. The best time today was yesterday. Second best times today. Anyway, guys, hope you got something out of this. If you enjoy this sort of different content, let me know your thoughts. And if you've got any topic ideas, send them across. Cheers.